Hello, it's March 2024, and some time ago I did a video talking about the 1990s being the last opportunity for whatever freedom was left at the time. And by no means was I stating or implying that there was no, for example, social conditioning that was taking place at that time. But it was the last time that we had any little bit of, as a descriptive, freedom and normalcy in society. And although it was slipping through our fingers, like trying to hold on to sand, it was there. And during that time is when we really seen some changes speeding up. Now, I've talked about social conditioning, or some might call it social engineering, over the many years of my content. But this has been going on for decades and decades, since the last, as a descriptive, reset. And everything that we're experiencing today, the extremism of it, started decades ago. Let's take, for example, when we look at, as a descriptive, cross-dressing. And I'm calculating my words here. This was being introduced to us a long time ago. When you look at, for example, through entertainment, whether it be movies, especially music, we start to see the introduction of that becoming more popularized. You look at, for example, in the 1960s, where, especially in the entertainment, as I said, specifically music, men, for example, wearing high-heel boots, that was the fashion. Bell bottoms, loose clothing, more feminine type of clothing, and that was becoming mainstream. And it was up until the 70s where we really seen this take hold. And for example, when you look at the music genre of heavy metal at the time, which is supposed to be very powerful and very, again, as a descriptive, manly and so forth, and yet the performers of that genre of music were dressing very feminine, again with high heels, and some musicians went to extremes with that. And then we also had the introduction of, as a descriptive, satanic themes. And there's one particular band who really took that to an unseen level before, and that's what put them on the map. And then everyone started to follow suit. But we see this introduction, for example, staying with this example of cross-dressing, and then it eventually evolved, skipping over a decade or two, to where we are today, where it's just become mainstream. And we see, for example, how men have become feminized, as a descriptive. And that's just an example of one of the social conditioning that has been taking place for decades. Very slowly, very gradually introduced. And if there's a little bit of resistance in its conception, then it's backed off a little bit, reintroduced, rebranded. For example, calling it something else, or using different genres of music or entertainment or whatever, but it's reintroduced. to the point where we are today. Artificially constructed. And the people, for example, as some might call the ruling class, the elites, whatever, they're imposing all these things for a reason. And a lot of this has been really pushed on the Western culture. England, Canada, United States, Australia. But other countries, eventually they followed because everything as a common descriptive became westernized, but they resisted. And over time, gradually, it leaked in, but they still resisted. And there's still resistance to these types of things. And some cultures still maintain their traditions, values, and social standards from the days of their old, except in the Western countries. And there's a common underlying theme to all this. And it seems to be one particular group who really push that narrative, for example, here in the West. So all this social conditioning has been going on for decades. But to reiterate, the 1990s were the last years, the last decade, where whatever little bit of normalcy and freedom that there was to be was. And it's not to say or imply that, for example, myself, I would want to go back to that decade. Especially I don't want to relive it. But just something to, as a standard, to compare what we're dealing with today. And you can really contrast the difference of today's world to back then. And that's really my point with all that. But the people who are imposing everything by design, and there's some chance mixed in there too, because there are things that occur in their favor, perhaps at times not in their favor, that are not anticipated, but there's that chance element as well. And the people who work for, again, as a descriptive, the ruling class, the elites or whatever, they benefit. And an example would be monetarily. It would benefit. And that's across the board. You take, for example, people who work for the revenue agency. People who are working inside either end up not having to pay taxes or pay next to nothing because they're on the inside. They know all the loopholes. They know what it's really all about. And they cannot come out and openly say, hey, this is what's going on here. Nor can they help people, for example, do their taxes because they know the system from the inside. And that's really key to understanding any topic, is having the perspective from the inside. For example, with law or the liberal arts theoretical pseudoscience of psychology, being on the inside and seeing the reality, not the artificial reality that is given to the people and people just blindly accept and assume and everything else. That's all part of social conditioning, and people are socially conditioned to believe, and to believe is to make an uninformed conclusion, all sorts of nonsense. This even goes into, for example, diet, what people eat, what foods are good for you. There was a time when they were really pushing, cholesterol is bad for you. It's, you have to avoid it. And to this day, there are people who accept that, despite new studies coming out decades ago saying, oh, we were kind of wrong with that. You actually need cholesterol. There's really not too much. The brain is made of it. But people just soak it all up. I've highlighted over the years, for example, veganism and how unhealthy it is. But people, still go off on talking about how healthy they feel. And sure, there's a little period of time when you become a vegan where you feel good because what you're doing is a form of fasting. Although you're eating raw vegetables or whatever, you're still fasting because there's really nothing there. The problem with that is the toxins in vegetables are not good for human consumption, but I've discussed that before. It's all social conditioning, fear-mongering, creating, for example, artificial scarcities, artificial issues, and people just go along with it. And then what is offered? Oh, well, here's some solutions. And people are too, as a descriptive, blind to see that these alleged solutions either don't work or they cause more harm. But just keeps people chasing the carrot on the end of the stick. And people go through their whole lives chasing that carrot. It's always just right there, but they keep moving forward, wasting their whole life. And then by the time they realize, where they've been chasing a ghost, they're up in age now. And then they want to recapture their youth. They want to dress youthful. They want to appear youthful. They want to be in shape. And as we get older, it becomes a lot harder to have that body we once had, say, in our late teens, early 20s, even mid 20s. It just gets harder because our bodies change. And people try to grasp onto their youth because they realized that they spent their youth preparing for and chasing that carrot on the stick. And then there comes a point in much older years when you have time to sit back and look and reflect and say, wow. And then from there, some people have regrets. They look back and think, I should have been, as an example, a better family person. I should have spent more time doing this or that. But by that time, the body is weaker, perhaps even just weak. The mind, same. And then you realize, and then you try to tell the youth, hey, ignore these fads that are being imposed. Don't go chasing the carrot, all these things. But then we have another social conditioning element of the youth dismissing what elders have to say. And then it just repeats. Hopefully there's something here to make you think. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.